Reigniting Main Street Podcast. I am Patrick Lee, the CEO of Spark Business Institute, SBI.
And I'm Laura Richards, COO of SBI. Patrick, unemployment right now is at its greatest since the Great Depression, and likely it's going to surpass that. Right now, the issues are being framed in an unconstructive manner. And we all know that the framework from which we approach a crisis determines the answers that we're going to be willing to consider. So knowing that, what are your thoughts on how this is impacting small business?
That's a good framework, because the truth is that our inability to have what I would consider an intelligent conversation about our dual issues right now. And it's actually more than dual issues, but the two main issues being obviously the health issue, the health crisis that we're facing, but then there's an economic crisis. I would contend that there's also social issues, social norm. There's probably going to be a mental health crisis at some point from all of this. There's an education crisis that's starting to take place that we're not paying attention to. So I think that because it's an election year and because the country entered this so polarized, that we're not approaching this in a way that gives us good options and has the required conversation going on. I mean, you still have people who consider it a complete hoax and it's just there for political purposes. And then you've got folks who believe that, okay, the health crisis is not significant. We should be ignoring it and we should just simply reopen the economy because the economy is everything. And I think when you limit the frameworks at which you're willing to analyze a situation or a crisis, you limit the answers and the options that are available to you.
Yeah, I can see where you're going with that. What is your suggestion on how we move forward? I know we've talked a lot about individual business owners and the different reactions that they're having within this, framework we're talking about, from, denial to, believing this is all a political conspiracy, to only looking at the health effects and not thinking more broadly about the economic impacts. How do you get people to stop ignoring the realities of one versus another, to act in not only their own self-interest, but in the best interest of Main Street as a small business?
I think the first thing is to avoid panic and to avoid conspiracy. If you find yourself stridently wanting something because you're fearful of, if it doesn't happen, the impact on you, then there's probably a bit of survival instinct, survival thinking going on with you. I mean, that's a sure sign. If this must happen or else, right? And it's all about what happens to you in that instance, then that's a sure sign that you're operating from a fear basis and a survival basis. So the moment that starts occurring, you need to stop and you need to take a look around. I mean, we can approach this in a lot of different ways, but let's be honest. For those folks who are saying we need to stay locked down until there's a vaccine, that's the most ludicrous statement you could make. The amount of impact on health, on people's ability to eat and survive, feed their families, have a roof to live on, that doesn't work by us hunkering down because there's a health crisis. And those of you out there who are just saying, hey, just open everything up. It's not that big a deal. It kills less people than the flu, all that. That's not true. It's not. There are bodies piling up. There are people dying. There are people very sick. This is not we can pretend like it's not there. So if you find yourself in either one of those camps, being a zealot or being strident, you're not helping the situation, because we need to be able to recognize that there can be multiple different crises going on at the same time. I mean, if we go back, we all go back to the Great Depression. There was multiple crises going on during the Great Depression. We had the Dust Bowl, we had World War II coming on, and we had the Great Depression. That's not one thing. It's multiple. And if we don't address each of them in a legitimate fashion, then we're probably not going to have impact.
So can you think about a client that you're working with or have worked with who has been in one camp or the other and really was able to back out of their position to reevaluate it in a way that they were able to make productive headway in their business right now?
Yes, but not consciously. It's an accidental awakening. Okay, because I had one client who had the worst psychological reaction of all my clients. I mean, this really hit this person hard, and I was very worried about him, both his business and personally. This was not a good situation for him, and he was struggling to see reality and to be reasonable and to make decisions that were sound. It was interesting because the only way to keep him focused and not doing something catastrophic for himself or his business was one little tiny step at a time, right? Like, we're just going to worry about getting you PPP applications and funding, and we're just going to worry about like little tiny things. And the whole time it was panic the whole way. Like, okay, well, we filled out the forms. How long is it going to take? When does the money come? You know, what if this happens? What if that happens? And you're like, look, let's just keep moving along. He's also somebody who believed very strongly, and probably still does, that this is all political and it's all just a conspiracy to out Trump or something along those lines. So what changed, though, was not his thinking. What changed was an opportunity came out of this. And by the way, folks, there's going to be a lot of opportunity that comes out of this. As bad as this is, and as much negative impact, there are going to be folks who find opportunity out of this that is large. And he stumbled onto one. It wasn't, he didn't do anything. He just is going to be the last person standing in an industry that he's going to be able to pick up the pieces, if he's lucky. I mean, we're not there yet. But what he just found out, that one of his largest competitors that is in 13 markets that he's not in has declared bankruptcy, closed down, is not going to reopen. All of that person's salespeople are calling my client saying, "Hey, we're out of business. We've got a Rolodex of people here. We're ready to hand over to you. What can we do here?" So he has a chance, if he survives this, to come out of this not in this panic state he was in, not with everything collapsing around him, but actually in incredibly good shape for the future. And he did nothing, right? Yeah. So imagine, though, if you take that same sort of situation and you plan it. It's not just that you get lucky and it falls in your lap. If you influence the things going on with your business, in your industry, what's around you, to maximize the possibility of opportunities like this happening. Right.
Yeah. And so thinking about that, obviously putting your head in the sand right now is the worst thing that you can be doing. Not addressing what the path forward could be during this, not waiting for the health crisis to end, but taking action is what your recommendation would be. Take it head on and look at what you can do.
Yeah. So let's imagine this right now, because we're all in the same situation as our clients, right? It's not like we're sitting over here waiting for the clients to come back, but we're clients of somebody else. So imagine this, if you would. We know everything's changed. This has radically changed our security and how we look at our world and what's possible and not possible and what we take for granted. We're hunkered down in our houses, or with severe limitations on what we can do. All of our habits are broken. You know, we're not in baseball season. We're not, going to concerts. We're not doing things that we've been doing without thinking about it forever. Okay.
Right.
And so we know the reality has changed. Whether we want to acknowledge it, I mean, there are some people who just think all we have to do is reopen and we're going to go right back to where it was. No, we're not. And even when we do get back to something that resembles normalcy, there is going to be long-term changes from this that are going to be in place in our society forever. Okay. This is a change event. So from my perspective, if I go back to my favorite restaurant and I walk back in and they act as if nothing's ever happened, right? Their menu's exactly the same. We're not allowed to sit, they've got their chairs with little police tape across the ones you're not allowed to sit in, right? Mm-hmm. There's a couple of familiar faces of wait staff that are sitting there, but it's not all of them, right? And the hustle and bustle of the place isn't there. And they've brought absolutely nothing new. I mean, I walk in and it just feels like a hollowed out version of what was there before. All I can see is, oh my gosh, everything's changed, right? Because I see the police tape and there's not a lot of people in there. And I don't feel like, oh, thank goodness we're back to normal. It's actually rubbing in my face that it's not back to normal. Now, imagine that you go to your favorite restaurant after all this is open and you go in and they have completely repainted. They've got new floors in. They've set up these really nifty little alcove-like seating so that, yes, you're social distance, but it's kind of cool. It doesn't feel like, you're in some kind of forensic experiment, right? Their menu is totally different. They've come up with a very innovative way of waiting on you, serving you drinks, interacting, and you feel not like, oh my gosh, everything's changed for the worse, but you feel like, wow, this is so different. This is so cool. You're pulled along with them in their new methodology, their new innovation. And those who do that well, will win in the market. People will go talk about it. You should go try that. You should see what they've done. It's incredible. And that's why you can't hunker down and just wait for things to quote unquote go back to normal. They're not going to, and you miss an opportunity.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Since I think I'm the queen of giving local examples here. So I'll give a local example to this. Vita Taco has a location in Annapolis on Main Street. They also have a location in Smyrna Park, and their location on Main Street was being renovated when Corona started. So it's been closed, and it was closed for another reason and continues to be closed. So, but Vita has a market here, and they innovatively, and this was in the Capital newspaper, I think last week, but they innovatively came up with a taco truck that delivers margaritas. And probably everyone's noticed by now, a lot of the liquor regulations have been altered for coronavirus to keep these restaurants open. They're doing, packaged cocktail takeout more or less. But Vita took it one step further, and they were delivering to neighborhoods, and an email would circulate, and people would go and they'd pick up their margaritas. And it turned out to be a fantastic revenue stream for Vita. And I had actually referenced them in a previous podcast that we did, because they also were doing a market where they use their garage doors to service the public with produce deliveries as well. So they're creating a couple of new revenue streams, knowing that it's going to be a while, and this could be the new normal for a while. And their customers want to support people. They're looking for ways to support the businesses they love. They understand that in order to make sure these places come back, there has to be some support in the interim. And I think we're going to see these things like what Vita was doing evolve over time and to become more and more on point. But this is thinking out of the box, and it's a great example of what you were just talking about.
Yeah, all they need is to have Santa Claus driving that food truck, and they're golden. But actually, just think about what you just said, because from forget strategy, forget everything else. From a tactical standpoint only, you just said that they had a big story in one of the local press about this, right? So they're not even relaunched yet, and they're already creating a name for themselves. And now stop and think about every single restaurant that you haven't heard a single thing about, and they didn't make an effort, right? There isn't any carryout, there isn't curbside, there's nothing. That's how the innovative folks get ahead of this. That's how you do it.
So, Patrick, backing up just a step to where we were when we came in on this, as small businesses on a more macro level, how do we start having this conversation about how we can talk about these issues, how we can band together to work in unison to affect change, and think about the future of what we're going to look like?
Well, I think what we need, and some of this, we were talking yesterday, and we've been talking about how it feels like some of the answers start to be the same. They start to sound the same. And in truth, they are, because they're just starting points. We need to figure out how to start having those local economic conversations, and that's going to lead to new things that I can't predict right now. So if you ask me, what is it going to lead? I'm not sure. But let's stop for a second. Instead of, I think these businesses that we've seen who on their own innovated for themselves, right? That's great. That you are being super smart. But let's stop for a second and let's look at the street that, the taco restaurant's on, or whichever restaurant. They reopen in 3 months, and 75% of the buildings around them are vacant. That's not good for them. No matter how much innovation they did or didn't do, that is not a good long-term strategy. You don't want to be on that street. So you best go and talk to the business owners around you. And you all best get together and say, okay, what can we request from the city, or what can we do for the street as a whole? Do we do a Wednesday night something, and all the businesses on the street participate in some way, and we call attention to this street, because we need success of every single one of these folks at some point here on that street, or the street's not viable. And so then you start thinking, okay, so we talk to the business owners around us. How do we go beyond that? Well, your chambers of commerce are so used to doing things in a stale, dead manner. And you probably have been frustrated, as most people are, with their chambers generally, and maybe have not participated. But I can tell you right now, I am watching the chambers try very hard to help and get on top of this. They're not blind to it, and they're trying hard. Your involvement and influence of going and participating in a forum that is about your local economy, your local businesses, that's only helpful. And if you help them innovate how they approach this, that's only helpful. I mean, one of the things that I will say here, and real quick, I'm in Maryland. I believe that our Governor Larry Hogan, has shown some of the best leadership that I've witnessed across the country. And for those of you who disagree, I'm sorry, but I didn't go in like an ardent supporter of the governor. Honestly, I wasn't sure what he was or wasn't going to be, but I have been very impressed. Now, that being said, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has their blind spots. And so one of the things that frustrated me with Governor Hogan's approach here is that I don't believe that he has involved voices from Main Street. I don't believe the small business community, to me, does not look well represented on his committees, at his forums. He seems very comfortable with his political advisors and bigger business advisors, and that then a voice from small business. Now, I'm sure he'll disagree, but as I'm looking at it, I'm not super impressed with that. Well, we need to demand that. We need to back the Maryland Chamber of Commerce's initiatives for them to have a seat at that table. And we need to pressure Governor Hogan that we want a voice in what this looks like as we reinvent. We don't want handouts. We don't want to depend on the brilliance of the political system to save us. We want a voice at that table. Well, then you got to demand it. Then you've got to go do that. And in all honesty, my suspicion is that Governor Hogan's, based on what I've seen, that he will respond positively if the case is brought to him appropriately. So that's just, one note to this.
I think it's an important one. And I think it's easy when you're dealing with a crisis and you're reshaping business and the way that you do it to focus on your backyard. And so just the reminder to reach out to the businesses around you, to form a community, to reach out to your chambers, to be active, and to understand that things are reshaping. And if you want to have your hand in what that form ends up looking like, you have to take action now.
You do have to take action now. And for those of you who are out there being innovative and driving around the taco trucks to people's houses with margaritas, which I think is a great idea, by the way, please swing by my house. There's a lot happening there. Like that can take up a lot of time. Yeah. But for every one of you business owners right now who I don't see driving a taco truck around, and I haven't heard a peep from in this entire time, you've got time on your hands. Okay, make use of it. If you're not going to innovate your own business, go out there and help advocate for small business, help advocate for what we started this whole conversation with. We need to have intelligent conversations about the entirety of this, not partisan conversations about our personal opinions about reality. Let's stop, look at a common good, and understand that if we're going to get out of this in some community semblance of order, we need to work together, talk across the aisles. We need to bridge the differences, right? And we need to be just intelligent about it. There are valid reasons why we cannot remain shut down the way we are. And there are valid reasons why we can't run around in the streets with no masks, acting like nothing happened. So there's always a middle. There's always alternatives. There's always a workaround. Let's have intelligent conversation and figure those things out.
Fantastic. I think that's a perfect place to end it, Patrick. You said it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank everybody for listening to Reigniting Small Business with SBI. And we'll be back with another podcast for you on Thursday. Have a good day.
Bye, guys.